The corridor was a mistake. Beatrice Langford knew it the moment her satin slippers hit marble instead of carpet, but momentum and panic propelled her forward anyway. Behind her, Lord Pembury's wine-soaked laughter echoed, "Come now, darling, just one dance." And ahead, a door stood mercifully ajar. She didn't think. She never did when cornered. The door gave beneath her palm, and she tumbled inside, breathless and flushed, yanking it shut behind her. Her spine pressed against cool mahogany as she gulped air, heart hammering against ribs and something else, something sharp, something crinkling. Her hand flew to her bodice. No, no, the manuscripts. She'd tucked them against her stays before leaving Lady Ashworth's townhouse, intending to slip them to Mr. Hallowell, the sympathetic printer, during the evening's crush. But the boning had loosened during her escape, and now, "You were never supposed to be seen." The voice was low, cold, and so devastatingly close that Beatrice's eyes snapped open. She wasn't alone. The Duke of Greymont stood 6 feet away, a glass of amber liquid frozen halfway to his lips. His dark eyes, everyone said they were grey, but no, they were darker, storm-cloud slate, fixed on her with the intensity of a man cataloguing evidence. And there was evidence. Oh God, there was evidence everywhere. 3 manuscript pages had escaped her bodice during her graceless entrance. They lay scattered across his Aubusson rug like accusations, ink side up, her cramped handwriting painfully visible in the firelight. The aristocracy maintains power not through divine right, but through calculated silence. They do not govern, they perform, and the performance requires that certain voices remain forever unheard. Beatrice watched his gaze drop to the pages, watched him set down his glass with deliberate care, watched him cross the space between them in 3 measured strides and crouch to retrieve the manuscript. He read. She stopped breathing. When he looked up, his expression was unreadable. Miss Langford. He knew her name. Of course he did. She was Lady Ashworth's companion, the silent shadow who poured tea and fetched shawls, and never ever spoke unless spoken to. The invisible woman. "You were never supposed to be seen." "Your Grace, I can explain." "Can you?" He rose slowly, manuscript pages in hand, and turned toward his desk, not toward the door, not toward escape. "Please, do explain why Lady Ashworth's timid little companion has broken into my private study carrying seditious literature. I didn't break in. The door was open." He set the pages on his desk with precision. "Yes, I left it that way intentionally. This wing is off-limits during entertainments precisely to ensure privacy." His fingers traced the edge of one page, "which makes your presence here either catastrophically unlucky or remarkably convenient." Beatrice's mind raced. Deny everything, claim she found the pages elsewhere. But no, her handwriting was distinctive, all cramped urgency and crossed T's, and he was intelligent. Everyone said Julian Carver, Duke of Greymont, possessed a mind like a steel trap. The Iron Duke, they called him. The man who'd voted against every reform, defended every tradition, condemned every whisper of change. "I write," she said finally. "I write about things that need to be written about." "Under whose authority?" "My own." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, anger, but it vanished before she could identify it. He moved to the fireplace, one hand braced against the mantel, and for a long moment said nothing. Then, "Who else knows?" "No one." "Miss Langford." He didn't turn. "If you lie to me now, I cannot help you." "Help me?" The laugh escaped before she could stop it. "You're the Iron Duke. You don't help people like me. You silence them." Now he did turn, and there was something dangerous in his stillness. "People like you. People who ask inconvenient questions. People who notice that children work 14-hour days in factories while lords debate which waistcoat to wear. People who—" She caught herself. But too late. The words had already spilled out, hot and reckless. His gaze sharpened. "Your BL truth." Her stomach dropped. The pseudonym. He'd made the connection. "I don't know what—" "The pamphlets circulating in 7 dials. The ones calling for factory reform and universal suffrage. They're signed BL Truth." He took a step toward her. "Beatrice Langford, BL. You can't prove—" "I can prove everything." He gestured toward the manuscript pages. "Your handwriting, your phrasing. You just confirmed it by not denying when I said BL Truth." Another step. "The question is, what do I do with you now?" Beatrice's hands clenched in her skirts. She thought of Lady Ashworth, aging and broke, dependent on the meagre income Beatrice's companionship position provided. Thought of the workers who trusted her to carry their stories. Thought of her father's grave, the headstone that read Viscount Langford, died of shame. "Please," she whispered, "ruin me if you must. But spare Lady Ashworth. She knows nothing. She's innocent." He studied her for a long moment, and in the firelight his features seemed carved from stone. Beautiful stone, sharp-edged and unforgiving. Then he crossed to the door, opened it, and spoke to someone in the corridor. Beatrice couldn't hear the words, but she heard the shock in the footman's reply. The Duke closed the door, locked it, turned. "I've just sent word that I'm indisposed. The evening is cancelled. All guests are to depart immediately." Beatrice stared. "What? You asked me to spare Lady Ashworth. I am, by ensuring no one sees her companion leaving my private study after an hour-long absence." He moved to his desk, began gathering her manuscript pages with methodical care. "But make no mistake, Miss Langford, you belong to me now." The words hung in the air like smoke. "I don't belong to anyone." "Then you belong to the law." Lee, he tapped the pages together, aligned them with sharp precision. "Seditious libel carries a sentence of transportation. 7 years in a penal colony if you survive the voyage." His eyes met hers. "Is that preferable?" Her throat tightened. "What do you want?" "The truth." He pulled a chair from behind his desk, positioned it in front of the fireplace, and gestured toward it. "Sit. We have much to discuss." She should have run, should have screamed, should have done anything except obey. But she sat, and Julian Carver, Duke of Greymont, destroyer of reformers and guardian of tradition, pulled a second chair close enough that their knees nearly touched and said, "Tell me everything." Beatrice had been 19 when she learned the cost of speaking truth. The memory rose unbidden as she watched the Duke read her manuscript pages, his expression giving nothing away. She'd been at a house party in Kent, young and foolish, and still convinced that honesty mattered. When she'd witnessed Earl Thornwood corner a maid in the garden, watched him threaten the girl's family if she refused his advances, Beatrice had told, loudly, publicly, at dinner. The Earl had laughed. The other guests had gasped in horror, but not at him, at her, at the hysterical girl making baseless accusations about a man of his standing. Within a week, her family's invitations dried up. Within a month, her father's business partnerships dissolved. Within 6 months, he was dead. Heart failure, the doctor said, but Beatrice knew better. Shame could kill as surely as any blade. "Your handwriting changes here." The Duke's voice pulled her back to the present. He pointed to a paragraph in the 3rd manuscript page. "Earlier sections are measured, calculated, but this—" His finger traced a line. "This is angry." Beatrice looked at the words he'd indicated. "They do not see us because they do not wish to. We are ghosts in their gilded halls, convenient when needed, invisible when inconvenient, and the greatest crime is not their blindness, but their insistence that we should remain forever unseen." "Sometimes anger is appropriate," she said quietly. "Is it?" He set the page aside and leaned back, studying her with that unnerving intensity. "My mother was angry once. She wrote letters to every newspaper in London, condemning the men who'd slandered her after my father's death. She wanted to be seen, heard, vindicated. Beatrice knew this story. Everyone did. The Duchess of Greymont's very public scandal 15 years ago, the whispers that she'd taken a lover, the cruel drawings in the papers, the way she'd fought back until... She killed herself, the Duke said flatly. 2 months after her campaign began, laudanum. The papers said she'd proven her guilt through cowardice. His gaze never left Beatrice's face. They were wrong. She proved only that some battles cannot be won by shouting louder than your enemies. I'm sorry. Are you? He rose, moved to a cabinet, and withdrew a leather portfolio. When he opened it, Beatrice glimpsed yellowed newsprint and letters in faded ink. She left me a note, one line, "Forgive me for not being strong enough to remain unseen." The words hit like a physical blow. Remain unseen. The same phrase he'd used when she'd burst through his door. "Why are you telling me this?" Beatrice asked. "Because you need to understand what happens to women who insist on being seen in a world designed to make them invisible." He closed the portfolio with a soft snap. "My mother died for speaking truth. I will not allow you to make the same mistake. By silencing me, by protecting you." He returned to his chair, but this time he didn't sit. He stood over her, and the fire cast shadows across his features that made him look older. Harder. "You will give me every manuscript, every draft, every name of every person who has helped you publish your work, and you will stop writing immediately." "No. Miss Langford." "No." She stood to face him, and God, he was tall. She had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze. "You're asking me to betray people who trusted me, workers who risked their positions to tell me their stories, printers who could be imprisoned for publishing truth. I won't. Then I'll hand you to the authorities myself." "Do it." Her voice shook, but she held firm. "I'd rather face transportation than live as a coward." They stood there, locked in silent battle, and Beatrice waited for him to move toward the door, to summon a footman, to end this. Instead, he laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, more surprise than humor. "You're serious?" "Entirely. You'd sacrifice everything. Lady Ashworth's security, your own future, for pride?" "Not pride, principle. They're the same thing to a magistrate." But something had shifted in his expression. "Sit down, Miss Langford, I'm not finished." "I thought we were." "That was my first offer. Here's my second." He gestured toward her chair. "Please." Against every instinct she sat. The Duke moved to his desk, withdrew a sheet of paper and began writing. The scratch of his pen filled the silence, methodical and unhurried. Finally, he signed with a flourish and returned to her. "A contract," he said, offering the paper. 6 weeks. You continue writing under my supervision. Every manuscript passes through me before publication. In exchange, I provide protection, financial, legal and social, for both you and Lady Ashworth." Beatrice took the paper, scanned the elegant script. "And if I refuse, I deliver you to the authorities tonight." "That's not protection. That's imprisonment." "No, Miss Langford, that's survival." He crouched before her chair, bringing them to eye level, and his proximity stole her breath. "In 6 weeks, Parliament votes on the Factory Reform Act. Lord Percival Thorne intends to block it. He profits handsomely from child labour, you see. But he needs aristocratic support, which means he needs men like me. You'd support reform? I would support whatever ensures that dangerous radicals like you survive long enough to see change happen properly, through channels, through law." His gaze didn't waver. "But you need to trust me. Trust the Iron Duke. Trust the man whose mother died, fighting the same battle you're attempting." He rose, offered his hand. 6 weeks, Miss Langford. Give me 6 weeks to keep you alive." She looked at his hand, at the contract, at the manuscript pages on his desk that could destroy her. You were never supposed to be seen. But she had been. He'd seen her. And somehow that felt more dangerous than any magistrate. "What happens after 6 weeks?" she asked. "That depends entirely on whether you survive them." His hand remained extended. "Do we have an agreement?" Beatrice thought of Lady Ashworth's worried face, of the children in factories, of her father's grave, of the Duke's mother's final note. She took his hand. His grip was warm, strong, and far too steady. 6 weeks, she whispered. 6 weeks, he agreed, and smiled. It was a small thing, barely a curve of lips, but it transformed his face entirely. "Welcome to your gilded cage, Miss Langford." The carriage ride to Greymont House the following morning felt like a funeral procession. Lady Cordelia Ashworth clutched Beatrice's hand so tightly that her rings left impressions. "I don't understand," she kept saying. "Why would the Duke request your presence? What did you speak about last night?" "Literature," Beatrice lied. "He's considering patronage for a educational initiative. But you're a companion, not a scholar. Perhaps he appreciates a fresh perspective." The lie tasted sour. Everything tasted sour. She'd barely slept, kept jerking awake from nightmares where she was locked in a cell while children screamed from factory floors. In one particularly vivid dream, the Duke had stood outside her cell, holding the key, asking again and again, "Who else knows?" Greymont House rose before them, all Portland stone and Georgian columns, beautiful and imposing in equal measure. A footman helped them down, and they were shown not to a drawing room, but to the east wing, the private wing. Lady Ashworth's grip tightened. "Beatrice, it's fine." It wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. "He likely wishes to discuss the arrangement in private." The footman deposited them in an anteroom and disappeared. Moments later, a door opened, and the Duke emerged, dressed more casually than last night. No coat, waistcoat unbuttoned, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked younger this way, more human, more dangerous. "Lady Ashworth," he bowed. "Thank you for bringing Miss Langford. I assure you, she'll be well cared for during her residency." "Residency?" Lady Ashworth's voice climbed. "Your Grace, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding." His tone was gentle but firm. "Miss Langford has agreed to assist me with a literary project of some delicacy. It requires her presence here for the next 6 weeks. I've prepared suitable accommodations in the East Wing, and she'll be chaperoned at all times. But her reputation will be protected by the fiction that she's a distant cousin from the country, visiting while recovering from a minor illness. No one questions a duke's family," he turned to Beatrice, "unless you'd prefer to return home." The unspoken threat hung between them. Return home, and the contract was void. Return home, and the authorities would be at her door by nightfall. "I'm honored to assist your Grace," Beatrice said hollowly. Lady Ashworth looked between them, confusion written across her weathered features. Finally, she squeezed Beatrice's hand once more. "Write to me. Every day." "Of course." After Lady Ashworth departed, the Duke's pleasant expression vanished. "Your room is this way." He led her through corridors that smelled of beeswax and old money, past portraits of stern-faced ancestors, until they reached a door at the corridor's end. Inside was a suite larger than Lady Ashworth's entire townhouse, sitting room, bedchamber, even a small writing desk positioned before a window overlooking the gardens. "You'll take meals in your room," the Duke said. "I have engagements most evenings, but we'll meet here daily at 2 o'clock. You'll bring whatever you've written. I'll review it." He moved to the desk, opened a drawer to reveal fresh paper and ink. "Any questions?" "Am I a prisoner?" "You're a guest. Guests can leave." "So can you." He met her gaze. "The moment you sign a confession admitting to seditious libel." Beatrice's hands clenched. "You said you'd protect me." I am protecting you from yourself. Adut, he crossed to the door, paused with his hand on the knob. My mother thought exposure would vindicate her. Instead, it killed her. I won't watch history repeat itself with you. I'm not your mother. No, he agreed quietly. You're far more reckless, which is precisely why you need a cage. The door closed behind him with a soft click. A moment later, she heard the unmistakable sound of a key turning in a lock. Beatrice stood in her beautiful prison and understood for the first time exactly what she'd agreed to. You were never supposed to be seen, but he saw her. God help them both. He saw her. The first 3 days passed in strange, suspended tension. Beatrice wrote. Not because the Duke demanded it, but because the alternative was madness. She wrote about the factory she'd visited last month, about the girl of 7 whose fingers had been crushed in machinery. She wrote about the foreman who'd shrugged and said, they're cheap enough to replace. When the Duke arrived at 2 o'clock on the 4th day, she thrust the pages at him without preamble. He read in silence, expression unreadable. Then, this will get you killed. It's true. Truth is a luxury you cannot afford. He set the manuscript aside. Write something else. Like what? A treatise on embroidery? Like something that doesn't directly accuse Lord Highbrook of manslaughter. He owns that factory. He also sits on the Privy Council. The Duke leaned against her desk, arms crossed. You want reform? Then you need Highbrook's vote when the Factory Act reaches the Lords. Alienate him now, and you guarantee its failure. So I should lie? You should be strategic. He picked up her manuscript again, pointed to a paragraph. Here, you describe conditions as inhuman. What if, instead, you framed it as unworthy of England's great industrial legacy, appeal to pride, not shame? Beatrice stared at him. That's manipulation. That's politics, which is how actual change happens. Your mother tried politics. Look where that... She stopped, horror flooding through her. I'm sorry, I didn't mean... Yes, you did. But his voice was calm. And you're right. My mother tried politics. She also tried rage. Neither worked because she had no allies, no strategy. He straightened, moved to the window. Do you know why I'm called the Iron Duke? Because you're inflexible. Because I'm careful. I don't speak unless I can guarantee the outcome. I don't fight battles I cannot win. He turned back to her. But I've been thinking, perhaps the reason I cannot win is because I've been fighting alone. Something in his tone made her breath catch. What are you saying? I'm saying that your words have power, Miss Langford. But power without direction is just destruction. He gestured to her manuscript. Rewrite this. Make Highbrook the hero who can save those children by supporting reform. Make him want to be that hero. That's dishonest. That's survival. For you, for Lady Ashworth, and for every child currently working 14-hour days. His gaze intensified. Unless you'd prefer to maintain your moral purity while they continue to die. The words hit like a slap. Beatrice wanted to argue, to insist that truth couldn't be bent for convenience. But she thought of the 7-year-old girl with crushed fingers, of the parents who'd wept, telling her their son had fallen asleep at his loom and been beaten for it. I'll rewrite it, she said finally. Good. He moved toward the door, then paused. Miss Langford, for what it's worth, I admire your principles. I just hope they don't get you killed. After he left, Beatrice sat at her desk and stared at the manuscript. The words blurred, reformed, became something else entirely. Truth and strategy. Perhaps they weren't enemies after all. By the end of the first week, a routine had established itself. Beatrice wrote in the mornings, walked the gardens in the afternoon, under the watchful eye of Mrs. Peterson, the housekeeper. The Duke arrived at 2 o'clock daily, and they debated. God, how they debated. She'd never met anyone who could match her point for point, who challenged every assumption and forced her to defend every word. "This paragraph implies the aristocracy is inherently corrupt," he said on the 8th day, tapping her latest draft. "Because it is. No, because the current system rewards corruption. Those are different things." "How?" "One suggests the problem is people. The other suggests the problem is structure." He grabbed a blank sheet, began sketching. "Look, if corruption is personal, then reform requires replacing every peer in Parliament. Impossible. But if corruption is structural, then reform requires changing laws. Achievable." Beatrice studied his rough diagram, boxes and arrows showing how power flowed through institutions. "You actually believe this can change?" "I believe it must change. The question is whether it changes through evolution or revolution." He met her gaze. "Your pamphlets push toward revolution. I'm trying to guide you toward evolution, because revolution frightens you, because revolution kills people like you first." He said it so quietly she almost missed it. "My mother tried revolution. She's dead, so I'm asking you to try evolution with me." Something shifted in the air between them. Beatrice was suddenly, acutely aware of how close they were standing, close enough that she could see gold flecks in his grey eyes, close enough to smell sandalwood and ink. "Why do you care?" she whispered. "Why not just turn me in and be done with it?" He hesitated, and for the first time she saw uncertainty flicker across his features. "Because," he said finally, "I'm tired of being the Iron Duke. And you're infuriatingly reckless and impossibly idealistic, and you make me remember that once, a very long time ago, I believed change was possible." Before she could respond, a knock sounded at the door. The Duke stepped back quickly, and the moment shattered. "Enter," he called. A footman appeared. "Your Grace, Lord Thorn has arrived. He says it's urgent." The Duke's expression went carefully blank. "Show him to my study. I'll be there shortly." After the footman departed, he turned back to Beatrice. "Lock this door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except Mrs. Peterson." "Who's Lord Thorn? No one you need to concern yourself with." "Your Grace." "Lock the door, Miss Langford. That's not a request." He left, and Beatrice turned the key with shaking hands. Then she moved to the window and watched as, 15 minutes later, a carriage departed Greymont House. She couldn't see inside, but she saw the Duke standing in the doorway, rigid and tense. Something had just gone very wrong. Lord Percival Thorn was not a patient man. He'd built his fortune on ruthlessness, and his reputation on knowing which threats to make and when. So when he settled into the Duke of Greymont's study and accepted a brandy, he didn't waste time on pleasantries. "You're harbouring a radical," he said. Julian's expression didn't change. "I'm harbouring a distant cousin. Miss Beatrice Langford, former companion to Lady Ashworth, daughter of the disgraced Viscount Langford." Thorn sipped his brandy. "Also known as B.L. Truth, the anonymous author currently threatening my business interests. I'm not familiar—" "Don't insult me." Thorn leaned forward. "I have sources, good ones. They tell me Miss Langford has been collecting testimonies from my factory workers, writing inflammatory nonsense about child welfare and working conditions." His lips curled. "And now she's disappeared into your household. How convenient." Julian kept his voice level. "Even if your information were accurate, which I'm not conceding, why would it concern you? The girl writes pamphlets. She has no real influence." "She has your influence. Or she will, once you're done grooming her." Thorn set down his glass. "The Factory Reform Act comes to vote in 5 weeks. I need your opposition. Instead, I'm hearing rumors that the Iron Duke is reconsidering his position." "Rumors are not facts. Neither is your loyalty, apparently." Thorn stood. "Here's what's going to happen. You will deliver Miss Langford to me within 72 hours. I'll ensure her indiscretions are dealt with quietly. In exchange, you will publicly oppose the Factory Act and convince at least 3 other peers to do the same." And if I refuse, then I'll expose her myself, very publicly, very thoroughly. Thorn moved toward the door, paused with his hand on the knob. She won't survive the scandal, Julian. Neither will Lady Ashworth, and your reputation as the careful, calculated Iron Duke also destroyed. He smiled. So really, the choice is simple. Give me the girl or lose everything. After Thorn departed, Julian stood in his study for a long time, staring at nothing. He thought of his mother's letters, still locked in their portfolio. Thought of her final note. Forgive me for not being strong enough to remain unseen. Thought of Beatrice Langford, locked in the East Wing, writing words that could save lives or end hers. You were never supposed to be seen. But she was seen now. Thorn had seen her. And Julian had just 3 days to decide whether to save her or sacrifice her. He poured himself another brandy and began to plan. Beatrice knew something had changed the moment the Duke entered her room the next day. He was early, noon instead of 2, and his usual controlled expression had cracked, revealing something raw beneath. He closed the door, leaned against it, and said, "We need to leave London." "What? Why?" "Because Lord Thorn knows who you are. He knows you're here. And he's given me 3 days to hand you over, or face exposure." The room tilted. Beatrice gripped her desk for stability. "How does he know? Does it matter?" The Duke pushed off the door, began pacing. "He wants you silenced, permanently, and he has the resources to make it happen, whether I cooperate or not." "Then give me to him." He stopped mid-stride. "I beg your pardon?" "You said it yourself. I'm reckless, dangerous, bad for your reputation." She forced the words past the tightness in her throat. "Let him have me. Protect yourself." "No, Your Grace." "No." He crossed to her in 3 long strides, and suddenly his hands were on her shoulders, grip firm enough to feel through her gown. "I made you a promise. 6 weeks of protection. I don't break my promises, even if keeping them destroys you." His gaze searched hers, and for a breathless moment she thought he might say something reckless, something dangerous. Instead, he released her and stepped back. "I have a country estate in Cumbria, isolated, secure. We'll leave tonight." "We? You don't think I'd send you alone? Thorn would intercept you before you reach the city limits." He moved to her desk, began gathering her manuscripts. "Pack only essentials. We leave at midnight." "And Lady Ashworth?" "Already en route to her sisters in Bath. I sent word this morning." He glanced at her. "You're not the only one I'm protecting, Miss Langford." Something warm and dangerous unfurled in Beatrice's chest. She tried to suppress it. This was strategy, nothing more, but it persisted anyway, stubborn as hope. "Why?" she asked. "Why risk everything for someone you barely know?" The Duke went very still. When he spoke, his voice was low. "Because you remind me that some things are worth the risk. And because—" He caught himself, shook his head. "We leave at midnight. Be ready." He left before she could press further. Beatrice stood in her beautiful cage and realized with dawning horror that she no longer wanted to escape, not if escaping meant leaving him behind. They departed Greymont House under cover of darkness, taking a plain carriage with no ducal crest. Julian drove himself. He trusted no coachman with this particular cargo, while Beatrice sat beside him, wrapped in a borrowed cloak, her manuscripts hidden in a false-bottomed trunk. The roads were empty, washed silver by moonlight. Neither of them spoke for the first hour. Finally, Beatrice broke the silence. "Your estate in Cumbria, you've been there recently?" "Not for years. It was my mother's favorite." His hands tightened on the reins. "After she died, I haven't been back. We don't have to go there. We could. It's the safest place I know, and perhaps—" He trailed off. "Perhaps. Perhaps it's time I stopped running from ghosts." They fell silent again. But it was different now. Comfortable. As if the darkness made honesty easier. Around 3 in the morning, they stopped at a posting inn to water the horses. Julian helped Beatrice down, and when his hands lingered at her waist a moment too long, she pretended not to notice the way her pulse jumped. Inside the inn, they were shown to a private dining room. Hot tea and cold meat appeared, and Beatrice realized she was ravenous. "You should sleep," Julian said. "We have hours yet to travel." "I'm not tired." It was a lie. Exhaustion pulled at her bones, but sleep felt dangerous, like surrender. "Miss Langford, Beatrice," she met his gaze. "If we're running from scandal together, you might as well use my given name." Something flickered in his expression. "Beatrice," he repeated, testing it. Then softer, "Julian." The name felt intimate in her mouth, wrong and right simultaneously. "Julian," she echoed. He looked away first, jaw tight. "You should know that even if we reach Cumbria safely, Thorn won't simply forget about you. He'll search, and when he finds us, then we'll face him together." "You sound very certain." "I am." She leaned forward. "You've spent 6 weeks teaching me strategy. Did you think I wasn't learning? What strategy is there in running? We're not running, we're regrouping." She pulled a folded paper from her pocket, the list she'd been compiling during their debates. "Thorn's weakness is his greed. He needs that factory vote to protect his profits, but if we can expose his corruption before the vote happens, we turn his weapon against him." Julian took the paper, scanned it. "These are names. Factory workers, witnesses, people willing to testify about conditions, about bribes Thorn paid to inspectors." She pointed to one name. "This man saw Thorn falsify safety records, and this woman can prove he's been skimming wages. Why didn't you mention this before?" "Because before I thought truth alone was enough. You taught me it isn't." She held his gaze. "Truth needs strategy, and strategy needs time, which is what Cumbria gives us." He stared at her, and she watched emotions chase across his features, surprise, approval, something deeper she couldn't name. "You're remarkable," he said quietly. "I'm practical. You're both." He folded the paper carefully and tucked it into his coat. "And you're right. We need time, so let's buy some." They returned to the carriage as dawn broke pink and gold across the hills, and as Julian guided the horses north, Beatrice allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, what it might be like if this wasn't temporary. If running towards something could feel like coming home. The estate rose from morning mist like a memory. Beatrice had expected grandeur, columns and marble, the usual ducal excess. Instead, she found a stone manor house, elegant but human-scaled, surrounded by gardens gone wild and a lake that reflected clouds like scattered pearls. "It's beautiful," she breathed. Julian's hands tightened on the reins. "She designed the gardens herself, said she wanted a place where she could be seen, free." He brought the carriage to a halt before the entrance. Same thing, perhaps. The interior was dust-sheeted and dim, but Beatrice could sense the love embedded in every choice, the position of windows to catch morning light, the cozy library stocked with philosophy and poetry, the music room with its pianoforte positioned to overlook the lake. "She played?" Beatrice asked, trailing fingers across ivory keys that released a ghostly chord. "Constantly, badly according to my father, but she didn't care." Julian removed Holland covers from furniture, releasing clouds of dust. "She said music wasn't about perfection, it was about feeling. She sounds wonderful." She was. He moved to the window, stared out at the overgrown gardens. Until they made her feel like a scandal instead of a person. Until being seen became unbearable. Beatrice joined him at the window. "What was her name?" "Eleanor. Eleanor Carver." He said it like a prayer. "She never wanted to be a duchess. She wanted to be a painter, but duty trumped desire as it always does. Is that why you became the Iron Duke? Because duty trumped desire?" He looked at her then, really looked, and there was such naked pain in his eyes that she nearly stepped back. I became the Iron Duke because watching my mother destroy herself taught me that passion kills, that caring too much about anything makes you vulnerable. So I stopped caring, stopped feeling, became exactly what they needed me to be: reliable, rigid, safe. And now? Now I've brought a radical writer to my dead mother's sanctuary, and I'm planning to commit social suicide by exposing a peer. A wry smile touched his lips. So perhaps I'm not as iron as I thought. Or perhaps you're finally becoming who you were always meant to be. The words hung between them, delicate as spider silk. Julian's gaze dropped to her mouth, and Beatrice's breath caught. He was going to kiss her. She could see the intention forming, could feel the air thicken with possibility. A crash from the front hall shattered the moment. They sprang apart as footsteps echoed through the house. Julian moved in front of Beatrice instinctively, positioning himself between her and the doorway. "Stay here," he ordered. "Like hell." But he was already gone, striding toward the noise with the confidence of a man used to command. Beatrice hesitated only a moment before following. In the entrance hall, they found an elderly woman wielding a poker like a sword, her face a mask of fierce determination. "Who are you?" she demanded. "This house is closed. I'll not have vagabonds." She stopped mid-sentence, squinting at Julian. "My lord?" Recognition dawned in Julian's expression. "Mrs. Blackwell?" The poker clattered to the floor. Oh, your grace. Forgive me. I didn't know. When did you—" She pressed a hand to her heart. "You're the very image of your father, my lord. I thought I was seeing a ghost. It's been a long time." Julian's voice softened. "You're still keeping the house. Someone has to. Even empty houses need tending." Her sharp gaze shifted to Beatrice. "And who's this?" "A friend," Julian said quickly. "Miss Langford, we'll be staying for a few weeks." Discreetly. Mrs. Blackwell's eyes gleamed with understanding. "I see. Well then, I'll prepare rooms and keep my mouth shut as always." She bent to retrieve her poker. "Your mother would be glad to see this house lived in again, Your Grace. It's been too quiet for too long." After she bustled off, Beatrice turned to Julian. "How many servants know we're here?" "Just Mrs. Blackwell and her husband, the groundskeeper. They've been with my family 40 years. If I can't trust them, I can't trust anyone." "And if Thorn traces us anyway? Then we'll already be 3 steps ahead." He pulled her list from his pocket. "You said these workers would testify. How do we contact them?" "There's a printer in Kendal, Mr. Hallowell's cousin. He can get word to them." "Kendal is 15 miles. We'll go tomorrow." "We? Did you think I'd let you travel alone? Not when Thorn has the resources to track us." He moved toward the stairs, paused halfway up. "Beatrice, thank you." "For what?" "For reminding me that hiding isn't the same as safety." "Dewey," he continued climbing, and his voice drifted back, "and for making me believe that maybe, just maybe, my mother's death can mean something after all." Beatrice stood in the entrance hall as afternoon light slanted through dusty windows and realized she was in terrible danger. Not from Thorn, not from scandal, from the terrifying possibility that she was falling in love with Julian Carver. You were never supposed to be seen. But he saw her. And worse, she was beginning to see him too. The next 3 weeks established a rhythm that felt dangerously domestic. Mornings they worked, Beatrice writing, while Julian drafted letters to potential allies. Afternoons they rode to Kendal or neighbouring villages, carefully gathering testimonies from workers willing to speak against Thorn. Evenings they debated strategy over dinner in Eleanor's old dining room, arguing until the candles burned low. And slowly, without either of them acknowledging it, the space between them narrowed. It started small, a hand at her elbow when she stumbled on rough ground, his coat draped over her shoulders during a cold evening ride, the way he'd started saying "we" instead of "I" when discussing plans. But the real shift came during their 4th week, when Julian took her to see his mother's studio. It was tucked behind the gardens, a small stone building with north-facing windows and walls covered in unfinished canvases. Beatrice stepped inside and felt her breath catch. Eleanor Carver had painted fury, not pretty landscapes or serene portraits. These were visceral, angry works. A woman trapped behind glass, clawing to break free. A child working at a loom, tears streaming. A crowd of faces pressed together, each mouth open in a silent scream. "She painted these after the scandal started," Julian said quietly. When she realized that being seen meant being devoured, Beatrice moved from canvas to canvas, transfixed. "These are extraordinary. These are what killed her." He stood before the final painting, a woman drowning, reaching toward light that wouldn't reach back. She showed them to a gallery owner. He called them hysterical ravings of a disturbed woman, said no one would ever exhibit such grotesque images. They're not grotesque, they're honest. Honesty isn't always beautiful. No, Beatrice turned to face him, but it's always necessary. They stood surrounded by Eleanor's desperate truth, and something fundamental shifted between them. "I'm afraid," Julian admitted, "that everything I'm doing, protecting you, gathering evidence, planning to expose Thorn, I'm afraid it's all just another form of what killed her, that caring is the trap." Beatrice crossed to him, hesitating only a moment before taking his hand. "Your mother didn't die from caring. She died from being alone with her caring. There's a difference." His fingers tightened around hers. "And if I'm not alone, if I let myself care about you, and we fail anyway, then we fail together, which is better than succeeding alone." He pulled her closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Beatrice," he breathed, "I shouldn't. I know. We can't. I know. But God help me, I want." She kissed him. It was brief, barely more than a press of lips, but it shattered every carefully constructed wall between them. When she pulled back, Julian's eyes were dark with want and fear in equal measure. "That was unwise," he managed. "Probably. Dangerous. Definitely. And I'm going to do it again." This time, when he kissed her, it wasn't brief. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite the urgency in his touch, and Beatrice melted against him. He kissed like a man starving, like someone who'd denied himself feeling for so long he'd forgotten how to measure it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "This changes everything," he whispered. "I know. If Thorn discovers, then we face him together." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "You told me passion kills, but maybe the real danger is in never feeling at all." He laughed, shaky and amazed. "You're going to destroy me. Or save you. We'll see." They stood in Eleanor's studio, surrounded by her painted fury, and for the first time in 15 years, Julian Carver felt genuinely, terrifyingly alive. But happiness, Beatrice learned, was a luxury the world rarely allowed for long. The letter arrived 3 days later, delivered by a nervous rider from Kendal. Julian read it twice, expression darkening with each pass. "What is it?" Beatrice asked. "Thorn. He's offered a reward for information about my whereabouts. Substantial enough that even loyal servants might be tempted. Mrs. Blackwell would never know, but someone saw us in Kendal. Word will spread." He set the letter down with controlled precision. "We need to return to London, now, before he tracks us here." "And do what?" "Exactly what you suggested. Expose him before he can expose us." Julian pulled out her list of witnesses. "We have testimonies. We have evidence of bribes. What we don't have is a platform dramatic enough to make it matter." Beatrice's mind raced. "The Devonshire Ball, 2 weeks away. Every peer in England will attend, including the Prince Regent." And what if Thorn isn't the only one who makes a scene? She grabbed paper, began writing rapidly. "We've been thinking too small. We don't need courts or parliament. We need public opinion so overwhelming that Thorn becomes toxic. You want to expose him at a ball?" I want to make him confess at a ball." She outlined her plan quickly. Witnesses positioned throughout the event, testimonies read aloud, evidence presented with theatrical precision. He'll have to respond, and in responding, he'll either confess or be proven a liar in front of everyone who matters. Julian studied her plan, and slowly a smile spread across his face. This is insane. This is strategic insanity. There's a difference. This will destroy my reputation. Your reputation is already destroyed by association with me. Might as well make it count. He pulled her close, kissed her soundly. You're extraordinary, you know that? You've mentioned it once or twice. When this is over. He hesitated. Assuming we survive, what then? Beatrice's heart stuttered. What do you want then? You, publicly, permanently. His voice was steady despite the intensity in his eyes. I want to marry you, Beatrice Langford. I want to stand beside you while you change the world, and I want every person in England to know that you're mine and I'm yours. That's quite possibly the worst proposal I've ever heard. It's not a proposal, not yet. First, we survive Thorn. Then, his smile turned tender. Then I'll ask you properly, with a ring and pretty words and all the romance you deserve. I don't need romance. Too bad, you're getting it anyway. They returned to London the next morning, and Beatrice realized she was no longer afraid. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And together they were unstoppable. The plan came together with military precision. Julian contacted 3 factory workers willing to attend the Devonshire ball as special guests. Beatrice prepared written testimonies, each one devastating in its simplicity. They secured copies of bribery receipts from a disgruntled inspector Thorn had underpaid. And they waited. The night of the ball arrived with unseasonable warmth. Beatrice dressed in a borrowed gown, midnight blue silk that made her feel like an imposter. Julian, in immaculate black evening wear, looked every inch the Iron Duke. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. "Terrified." "Good. Means you're thinking clearly." But his hand was steady on hers. "Remember, we don't start until Thorn makes his move. He'll try to expose you first. That's when we turn the tables." They entered the ballroom, and Beatrice felt every eye track their arrival. The whispers started immediately. The Duke brought a companion. Heard she's a radical. Absolutely scandalous. Julian ignored them all, guiding her toward the edge of the room where their witnesses waited, disguised as servants. Everything was in position. But Beatrice had underestimated one critical factor: Lady Cordelia Ashworth's desperation. Her former guardian appeared from the crowd, face pale and eyes red-rimmed. "Beatrice," she whispered urgently, "you need to leave. Now." "Lady Ashworth? What are you doing here?" "Thorn sent for me. He knows about the plan. She caught Beatrice's arm. "He has evidence against me. Gambling debts, forgery. He'll ruin me unless I help him." Ice flooded Beatrice's veins. "Help him how?" "By confirming his accusations against you. By testifying that you stole from me, that you're unstable, dangerous." Tears spilled over. "I'm so sorry, child. I don't want to, but he'll destroy me." "It's all right." Beatrice squeezed her hand, mind racing. Another variable, another weapon Thorn could use. "Where is he?" "In the card room, waiting." Lady Ashworth's grip tightened. "Please, run. I'll delay him as long as I can." But before Beatrice could respond, a commotion erupted near the ballroom's entrance. Lord Percival Thorn had arrived. He moved through the crowd with predatory confidence, and when his gaze found Beatrice, he smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Your Grace," he called to Julian, voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. "How delightful to see you, and with such interesting company." Julian's arm tightened around Beatrice's waist. "Lord Thorn, I do hope you'll forgive my intrusion, but I felt it necessary to address certain allegations that have been circulating. Thorn pulled a sheaf of papers from his coat. "Papers I believe you'll find quite illuminating." Beatrice's heart sank. He had copies of her manuscripts. Of course he did. "Lord Thorn," Julian said carefully, "perhaps this conversation would be better conducted in private." "Oh, I think not. After all, when one's beloved is accused of seditious libel, defamation and theft, the public deserves to know the truth. Wouldn't you agree, Lady Ashworth?" Every head swiveled toward Lady Cordelia, who stood frozen, tears streaming. This was it. The moment Thorn would destroy them all. But Beatrice had learned strategy from the best. "You're absolutely right, Lord Thorn," she said, stepping forward before Julian could stop her. "The public does deserve truth, so let's give it to them." She pulled her own papers from her reticule, the testimonies, the bribery receipts, and held them high. "My name is Beatrice Langford. I write under the pseudonym B.L. Truth, and everything I've written about Lord Thorn's factories is documented truth." The ballroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Thorn's smile didn't waver, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "How bold," he said, "and how foolish. Your Grace, surely you don't condone—" "I more than condone it." Julian stepped forward, positioning himself beside Beatrice. "I helped compile the evidence. Would you like to see it?" The silence that followed was absolute. Thorn's mask cracked. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Julian gestured toward the edge of the room. "Perhaps we should ask Mr. Thomas Carr, who worked in your Manchester factory for 6 years. He has quite a story about the day you paid an inspector £50 to overlook machinery violations. The same machinery that later crushed a child's hand." A middle-aged man in borrowed formal wear stepped forward, trembling but resolute. "It's true, I saw it all, kept records. Or perhaps," Beatrice continued, "we should hear from Mrs. Sarah Wickham, whose daughter died when unsafe scaffolding collapsed. Scaffolding you'd been warned about 3 times, but refused to repair because it would cut into profits." A woman emerged from the crowd, clutching a worn envelope. "I have the letters, every warning, every refusal." Thorn's face had gone white. "This is absurd. These people are lying, paid to—" "Are these people lying too?" Julian produced a ledger, held it up for all to see. "These are your own records, Lord Thorn. Payments to inspectors, falsified safety reports, wages skimmed from workers too desperate to protest." He turned to face the crowd. "I acquired them through legal means, from a clerk who could no longer stomach being party to such corruption." The crowd's murmur grew louder, angry now. Beatrice saw recognition dawn on several faces. These weren't abstract accusations anymore. These were real people with real evidence. But Thorn was not finished. "Very clever," he hissed. "But you've forgotten one thing. Lady Ashworth." He snapped his fingers, and 2 men materialized beside Lady Cordelia. Not servants, enforcers. "Lady Ashworth owes me considerable sums," Thorn announced. "Gambling debts accrued over 2 years. She signed promissory notes. Legal documents promising payment, or—" he smiled coldly, "or her public confirmation that Miss Langford is a thief and a liar. A woman of questionable sanity who stole from her own guardian." All eyes turned to Lady Cordelia, who stood frozen, tears streaming down her weathered face. "It's true," she whispered. "I owe him so much, and if I don't say what he wants, he'll—" Her voice broke. "He'll have me arrested for fraud." Beatrice's chest tightened. This was the trap she'd missed. Thorn hadn't just targeted her. He'd ensured Lady Ashworth would be complicit. "Tell them," Thorn commanded. "Tell them what Miss Langford really is." Lady Cordelia looked at Beatrice, and in her eyes was desperate apology. Then she straightened her spine. "Miss Langford," she said clearly, "is the bravest person I've ever known." Thorn's smile vanished. "She didn't steal from me," Lady Cordelia continued, voice growing stronger. "She saved me. When I was drowning in debt, too ashamed to ask for help, she worked extra hours, went without meals, sacrificed her own comfort to keep us afloat. And yes, Lord Thorn, I do owe you money, because I'm weak, because I made terrible choices." She turned to face him directly. "But I will not compound those choices by destroying the one person who showed me genuine kindness. Arrest me if you must, ruin me if you will. But I will not lie for you." The ballroom erupted in chaos. Thorn lunged forward, face twisted with rage. "You stupid woman!" But Julian was faster. He stepped between Thorn and Lady Cordelia, and when he spoke, his voice carried with absolute authority. "That's enough." The room fell silent. "Lord Thorn," Julian said, "you came here tonight to destroy Miss Langford's reputation. Instead, you've destroyed your own." He gestured to the crowd. "Every person in this room has now heard testimony from multiple witnesses, has seen evidence of bribery and corruption, has watched you attempt to coerce an elderly woman into perjury. You have no authority. I have the authority of truth." Julian's voice was steel. "And more importantly, I have the ear of every peer in this room, including the Prince Regent." As if summoned, a figure emerged from the crowd. The Prince Regent himself, face grave, flanked by two official-looking men. "Lord Thorn," the prince said quietly, "you will accompany these gentlemen. There are questions that require answers. Your Highness, this is a conspiracy. This is justice." The prince's gaze shifted to Julian, then to Beatrice, calculating, "We will investigate these claims thoroughly, if they prove accurate." He didn't finish, but the threat was clear. Thorn made one last, desperate move. He grabbed the papers from the nearest table, Beatrice's manuscripts, and held them up. "But she's admitted it. She's BL. Truth. She writes sedition, defames her betters. She writes truth," a new voice interjected. Everyone turned. An elderly Duke Beatrice didn't recognize stepped forward, leaning heavily on a cane. "I'm the Duke of Pemberton," he announced, "and I've been reading BL Truth's pamphlets for months. At first, I dismissed them as radical nonsense, but then my grandson, my heir, was injured in one of Lord Thorn's factories. 7 years old, working because his father died in debt to men like Thorn." His voice cracked. "Miss Langford's writing saved his life, made me see what I'd been ignoring. So yes, she writes about uncomfortable things, but uncomfortable truth is still truth." Another voice joined in, then another. Slowly, impossibly, other aristocrats began speaking up, sharing their own encounters with Thorn's cruelty, their own doubts about the system they'd defended. Beatrice felt Julian's hand find hers, squeezed tightly. This was it. The moment everything changed. Thorn, seeing his support crumble, tried once more to flee. But the prince's men blocked his path, and he was escorted from the ballroom with all the dignity of a common criminal. The silence that followed was deafening. Then the Prince Regent turned to Julian. "Your Grace, you've made quite a scene tonight. Broken protocol, brought workers into my presence, defended a woman who writes against the very institution you represent." His expression was unreadable. "I should be furious. I understand, Your Highness. But," the prince's lips quirked, "I'm also not blind. Lord Thorn's corruption has been an open secret for years. No one dared challenge him because he had too much power. Too many secrets." He glanced at Beatrice. "It took a brave woman and a reformed duke to finally force the truth into light." Julian's grip on Beatrice's hand tightened. "However," the prince continued, "actions have consequences. Your Grace, you will retire from your position as counselor to the crown. This is not a punishment. Consider it a sabbatical. Return when you've decided whether you wish to be the Iron Duke or something else entirely." Julian bowed. "I understand, Your Highness. As for you, Miss Langford," the prince studied her with shrewd eyes, "you've caused quite a stir, but you've also done what our courts and parliament have failed to do, expose genuine corruption. So I will not prosecute you for sedition, But I will ask that in the future you direct your considerable talents towards solutions, not just problems." Beatrice curtsied, barely trusting her voice. "Yes, Your Highness." The prince nodded once, then swept from the ballroom, leaving behind a crowd that didn't know whether to applaud or condemn. In the end, they did both. They left the ballroom together, ignoring the stares and whispers. Lady Cordelia followed, still trembling, and Julian ordered his carriage brought around immediately. Inside the carriage, Lady Cordelia buried her face in her hands. "I'm so sorry, so desperately sorry. I should have told you about the debts. You did exactly what needed to be done," Beatrice said firmly, taking her hands. "You told the truth. That took more courage than anything else tonight. But I nearly destroyed you. You saved me. We saved each other." Beatrice glanced at Julian, who was watching them with quiet intensity. "That's what people do when they're not alone." Lady Cordelia squeezed her hands, nodded through tears. When they reached Lady Ashworth's townhouse, Beatrice helped her guardian inside, promising to visit in the morning. Then she returned to the carriage where Julian waited. "Your house or mine?" he asked, tone carefully neutral. "Yours. We need to talk." The drive to Greymont House passed in charged silence. Inside, Julian dismissed the servants and led Beatrice to his study, the same room where this had all begun. He poured 2 glasses of brandy, handed her one, and they stood before the fireplace without speaking for a long moment. Finally, Julian said, "You were magnificent tonight." "So were you." "I lost my position." "I know. My reputation is ruined." "I know." He turned to face her fully. "And I've never been happier in my entire life." The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Beatrice set down her glass with shaking hands. "What happens now?" "Now?" He stepped closer. "Now I do what I should have done weeks ago." He took both her hands in his, and in the firelight his eyes were molten silver. "Beatrice Langford, you're reckless, infuriating, impossibly brave, and you've turned my entire world upside down. You've made me question everything I believed about power and duty and safety. You've forced me to confront truths I spent 15 years avoiding. Is this the romantic proposal you promised? I'm getting there." His lips quirked. "You've also made me realize that my mother didn't die because she was seen. She died because she was seen alone, with no one willing to stand beside her. And I swore I'd never make her mistake, never care so much that losing became unbearable." "Julian, but then you ran into my study with manuscripts spilling from your bodice and fire in your eyes, and I realized I'd been making the opposite mistake. By refusing to care, I'd become exactly what killed her, another person who chose silence over courage." He released one hand to pull a small box from his pocket. "So here's the truth. I love you, completely, desperately, in a way that terrifies me because it makes me vulnerable. But I'd rather be vulnerable with you than safe without you." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band set with a single sapphire. "Marry me, Beatrice. Stand beside me while we rebuild everything I just destroyed. Make me better than I was, and let me do the same for you." Beatrice stared at the ring through tears she hadn't realized were falling. "That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. You said that last time." "I know. I'm consistent." She looked up at him, this man who'd started as her jailer and become her partner. "Yes, yes, yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll stand beside you. Yes, to all of it." She laughed through tears. "Though for the record, you're getting a radical writer who's terrible at following rules and will probably cause you endless scandal. I'm counting on it." He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. "Besides, I think the Iron Duke needs to be permanently retired. I'd rather be the man who stands beside BL Truth while she changes the world." "We change the world," she corrected. "Together." "Together," he agreed. And then he kissed her, deep and thorough and full of promise, and Beatrice understood that some cages were meant to be broken and some transformations were meant to be shared. You were never supposed to be seen, but she was seen now, fully, completely, without apology. And it was everything. 3 months passed in a blur of activity. Lord Thorne was formally investigated, found guilty of bribery and criminal negligence, and exiled from England permanently. His factories were seized and reformed under new ownership that included worker protections Beatrice had drafted. The Factory Reform Act passed by a narrow margin, but it passed. Lady Cordelia's debts were quietly settled by Julian, and she became one of Beatrice's staunchest allies, using her social connections to champion further reforms. And Beatrice herself became something unprecedented, an acknowledged voice for change, writing now under her real name, with Julian's full support and partnership. They married in a small ceremony at Eleanor's estate in Cumbria, with only close friends present. No aristocratic fanfare, no social performance, just 2 people choosing each other in front of witnesses who mattered. During the ceremony, Julian added his own vow. You were never supposed to be seen, but I see you. I will always see you, and I will spend my life ensuring the world never looks away. Beatrice had cried then, understanding that he'd taken her mantra, the words that had defined her pain, and transformed them into a promise of healing. 6 months after the Devonshire ball, Julian and Beatrice stood in the ruins of what had been Thorne's largest factory. They'd purchased it together, planning to convert it into a school for working children. Your mother would have loved this, Beatrice said, studying the plans they'd drafted, a place where children are seen, valued, educated instead of exploited. Julian wrapped an arm around her waist, pulled her close. She would have loved you. The woman brave enough to be seen even when it was dangerous. I wasn't brave. I was desperate. Same thing sometimes. He pressed a kiss to her temple. And look what your desperation created. Beatrice looked around at the workers already beginning renovations. Men and women paid fair wages, working reasonable hours, treated with dignity. At the plans for classrooms and libraries and spaces designed for learning instead of labor. We did this together, she said. We did. And we're just beginning. A voice called from across the construction site, Mr. Carr, now their foreman, waving papers that needed signatures. Julian squeezed her hand once before moving to address the issue, and Beatrice watched him go with a mixture of love and amazement. The Iron Duke had become something softer, warmer, more human, but no less powerful, just powerful in a different way. The book launched 6 months later. Beatrice stood in a small bookshop in Seven Dials. Not a fashionable location, but the right one, surrounded by workers and reformers and ordinary people whose stories she'd told. The title gleamed in gold on dark blue leather, Voices Unsilenced, a chronicle of change. Lady Cordelia sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Mr. Carr and Mrs. Wickham flanked her, equally proud, and at the very back, trying to be inconspicuous and failing entirely, stood Julian. He caught her eye and mouthed, "You've got this." Beatrice opened the book to the dedication page and read aloud, "For Eleanor Carver, who was never allowed to be fully seen. And for Julian Carver, who learned to see." Her voice trembled only slightly as she continued to the preface. "This book is for those who were told they were never supposed to be seen, for the children working in darkness, the women silenced by propriety, the men dismissed as beneath notice. This book insists you matter, your stories matter, your voices matter. And to those who hold power, the greatest crime is not ignorance but willful blindness. We are all responsible for what we choose not to see." She looked up, found Julian's gaze across the crowded room. "But this book is also about hope," she continued, "because change is possible. Not easy, not quick, but possible. It requires courage from those without power to speak truth. And it requires even greater courage from those with power to listen, to change, to choose justice over comfort. She closed the book, held it against her chest. 3 years ago, I wrote in secret because I believed being seen meant destruction. Tonight, I stand before you with my name on this cover because I learned that being seen, truly seen, is the only way to create real change. And I didn't learn that alone. I learned it from every worker who risked their livelihood to testify, from Lady Ashworth, who chose truth over safety, from a man who started as my adversary and became my partner. Julian's smile was visible even from across the room. So this book is my promise, Beatrice finished, that I will keep speaking, keep writing, keep fighting, because you deserve to be seen. We all do, and together we will make sure the world never looks away again. The applause started slowly, then built like a wave. But Beatrice barely heard it. Her eyes were on Julian, who was moving through the crowd toward her. When he reached her side, he didn't say anything, just took her hand and stood with her, solid and steady and utterly present. You were never supposed to be seen, the old mantra echoed through her mind one final time. Then Julian leaned close and whispered in her ear, "You were always meant to be seen, and I will make certain the world never looks away." And Beatrice finally, fully believed it. Epilogue: 2 years later, the school opened its doors. The Eleanor Carver Academy for Working Children stood on the site of Thorne's worst factory, transformed beyond recognition. Light flooded through new windows. Gardens bloomed where machinery had churned, and in classrooms designed for wonder instead of exploitation, 60 children learned mathematics and reading and art. Beatrice walked the halls with Julian, watching students bent over books with expressions of fierce concentration. In one classroom, a girl of 8 stood at the front, reading her own story aloud. In another, boys built models of bridges and buildings, learning engineering that would serve them as architects instead of laborers. "Your mother would be so proud," Beatrice said, squeezing Julian's hand. "Our mother," he corrected gently. He'd started saying that after their wedding, including Beatrice in Eleanor's legacy. And yes, she would. They stopped at a portrait hanging in the entrance hall, Eleanor at her easel, painted from one of her own self-portraits. Fierce and beautiful and uncompromisingly honest. Below the portrait, a plaque read, "Those who insist on being seen create space for others to be seen as well." A child ran past, laughing, chased by friends. No haunted eyes, no exhaustion, just pure childhood joy. "We did it," Beatrice whispered. "We're doing it," Julian corrected. Present tense, because this is just the beginning. He was right. 3 more schools were already planned. Parliament had passed additional labour protections. Lady Cordelia had started a fund for indigent widows. Change was happening, slowly but inevitably, not because of one person, because people had chosen to see each other. Beatrice leaned into Julian's embrace, and he wrapped both arms around her, resting his chin on her head. They stood like that for a long moment, watching their dream take shape in real time. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I was never supposed to be seen. That's what they told me. What I believed." She turned to face him. "But you saw me anyway. Even when it was inconvenient. Even when it was dangerous. You looked at me and insisted I mattered. You did matter. You do matter. So do you." She rose on tiptoes to kiss him softly. "So does everyone. That's what we're teaching them here, that every voice deserves to be heard. Every life deserves dignity. Even the messy, inconvenient ones. Especially those." A bell rang, signaling the end of lessons. Children poured into the hallway, their chatter filling the space with noise and life. Several waved at Beatrice and Julian as they passed, and Beatrice waved back, smiling. "You know what I realized," Julian said, as they watched the children disperse. "My whole life, I thought strength meant control, meant being iron, unbreakable. And now? Now I know real strength is choosing to be seen, being vulnerable enough to change, being brave enough to say, I was wrong, and mean it. He pulled her close. You taught me that. You and every person who trusted us with their stories. We taught each other, Beatrice said. That's how it works. They left the school as evening fell, walking hand in hand through streets that felt different now, safer, more hopeful, still imperfect, still struggling, but moving in the right direction. At home, Julian built a fire while Beatrice reviewed tomorrow's agenda, a meeting with factory owners, a speech at Parliament, revisions to her next book. The work never ended, but she wasn't doing it alone. Julian settled beside her on the settee, pulling her against his side. Read me what you've written today. She grabbed her notebook, flipped to the latest entry. It's rough. Always is at first. She read aloud. We are told that some people are meant to be invisible, convenient shadows who make the world run without troubling those in power with their presence. But here is the truth. No one is meant to be invisible. We are all meant to be seen, heard, valued. And when one person insists on being seen, truly seen, it creates permission for others to do the same. This is how change happens, not through grand gestures or heroic individuals, but through ordinary people making the extraordinary choice to be visible. She looked up. Julian was watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. Love and pride and something deeper, something that felt like recognition. It's perfect, he said. It's true. Same thing. He kissed her then, soft and lingering, and Beatrice thought about how far they'd come. From that desperate night when she'd fled into his study, manuscripts spilling, to this moment, married, partnered, building something that mattered. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I love you too, more every day. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. Thank you. For what? For running into my study, for refusing to be silent, for making me see that safety isn't the same as strength. His hand cupped her face. For teaching me that being seen is terrifying and necessary, and the only way to really live. Beatrice covered his hand with hers. You were always meant to be seen too, Julian Carver. You just needed someone to show you how. They sat together as night deepened, fire crackling, future unfolding. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were always challenges. But tonight, they had this. Each other, their work, their shared belief that the world could be better, that everyone deserved to be seen. Julian's arms tightened around her, and Beatrice closed her eyes, content. You were never supposed to be seen, the old voice whispered one last time. But then Julian's voice, steady and sure, spoke the truth that had replaced it. You were always meant to be seen, and I will make certain the world never looks away. Not from you, not from any of us, not ever again. And in that promise, Beatrice found everything she'd been searching for. Not just love, though there was that in abundance. Not just purpose, though their work gave life meaning, but something simpler and more profound. The absolute certainty that she mattered, that her voice counted, that being fully, completely, unapologetically seen was not a crime, but a birthright, one she would spend the rest of her life defending for others. Together they had changed the world, and they were only just beginning, the end. If you made it to the end of Beatrice and Julian's journey, thank you for being here. Their story of finding courage to be seen, of choosing love over safety, of transforming pain into purpose, is one I hope resonated with you. Stories like these exist because of readers like you who believe that everyone deserves dignity, voice, and the right to be fully seen. If this story moved you, I'd be so grateful if you'd like this video, leave a comment sharing what spoke to you, and subscribe with notifications on so you never miss another tale of justice, transformation, and love. And if you're ready for another journey, the next story is waiting for you. Thank you for being here. You're the reason these stories exist.